In today's episode of Kenny Cool, I'm going to share with you 3 stories, all that came from the same location, and you switch over to the web view to show you what I'm talking about. I wrote this article called Tales of a Field Geologist Part 1, and what I'm going to tell you about is Part 2. But in this article, I'm recounting examples of what it's like to be a field geologist, and I did field geology for 20 years. And here's 3 stories for you to look at, which are pretty good stories, but what I'm going to show you today all happened in at a landfill in Tennessee. These are funny. Up in northeast Tennessee, in a town called Kingsport, there's a landfill that's shown here called Sullivan County Landfill, and this landfill was producing a lot of groundwater contamination back in the 90s. The geologic situation here is that they built this landfill absolutely in the wrong area. It's over a plunging anticline or syncline, I can't remember exactly, but this anticline or syncline is filled with karst features. So you have big bedding planes that are missing, and when leachate comes out of this landfill, leachate I'm going to describe to you in a minute, it gets down into these caves and caverns, and it can move along the bedding planes and move for many miles without dilution. And so the job that we had was to basically investigate the area and try to determine the nature and extent of contamination around this zone, because as I zoom out, you can see there's residents around it. So here's the stories. Story number 1, leachate. What the hell's leachate? Well, when you build a landfill like this and you stack it with 60 or 80 vertical feet of trash, everything possibly you can imagine, everything from tires to yarn to steel rims to food debris, all the garbage that we produce. And then you rain on this. The clay covers the trash, but water gets in there and it begins building up inside the landfill. So we were out here somewhere in the heart of the landfill with drilling with a cable rig, which basically, it doesn't drill through this stuff because you can't, because there's so much compacted material in there. You basically hammer your way down. And after a few days of ear-ringing hammering, we finally got down and installed a sampling well to pull this leachate out. Now, to give you the truth about leachate, to try to help you appreciate it, I remember telling people, well, if you can imagine the combination of baby vomit, diarrhea, blood, phlegm, every imaginable horrendous smell that you can imagine concentrated into a liquid form, and it's yellowish orange, very thick, murky stuff, and when you pull it out, you put it in sampling vials, but you actually have to smell this stuff. And it's emanating to such a degree that the smell gets into your sinus cavities, and it basically absorbs into your sinus cavities. And so after I sampled the leachate, it was about a week later, I was walking down the office back in Knoxville, and the desorption process started happening, and all of this leachate smell came out in my nose, and I was looking around saying, who's got the leachate? And so it was desorbing off inside my head, basically my sinuses. And so sampling of leachate is no fun at all. But it was this leachate that produces the groundwater contamination. So we were over here in this part of the landfill. Now this looks a little different than when I was working there. But basically, we were coming off of the top of the landfill going down, and I was walking behind a bulldozer. And what we were doing was trying to get out to where the woods are here to clear an area to do some investigation work to try to determine the nature and extent of contamination. And so when we were going down off of this landfill, which the bulldozer driver is just driving over basically old compacted clay. Him and my friend were ahead of me, and I was walking in his tracks. And then all of a sudden he said he heard this scream, and he turned around, and what he saw was this human form encapsulated in yellow jackets. He had driven over yellow jacket nests, and I literally walked right into it. Now I was covered in Tyvek. My hands were uncovered, my face was uncovered, but had from top down, I had sunglasses on. But the first thing I recognized, I didn't recognize that I walked into a swarm of yellow jackets. What I felt was heat on the back of my hand, right here. I'd been stung so many times in the back of the hand that it felt like my hand was on fire. So the next thing I knew is I looked at my hand and I could see all of the insects swarming all over me. And then I realized I was in the middle of a swarm and they were everywhere. I looked and I couldn't see out of the swarm. So I literally slipped and slided down this landfill trying to get away from these guys. And I ran this entire length. This was a road back then. And I sprinted. It was about 100 degrees. And I did my best sprint all the way down this road. And I got to about here, right over here, which was maybe a quarter-mile sprint, when the landfill owner was coming down this road in his Chevy Blazer. So he saw me obviously in distress. I was trying to knock the bugs away because they were following me. They were stinging me. I got stung in the eyes and the face and the hands. And he threw me in the car and took me to the hospital because I was having an anaphylactic shock. I was having reaction to all these things. My hand blew up to like twice the size. I had big, huge welts all over my face. And of course I was sweating profusely because I just ran a quarter mile. But that wasn't really a fun story, but it was, it's what happened there. And then the third story was, if we go way down dip of or down gradient of this landfill, come out here in these trees or even beyond, I can't remember exactly where, it was pretty far away, there was a road. Let me see if I can tell where it is. Yeah, out by these trees, about a mile away from the landfill, there were caves over here. And so we were going down into these caves to try to sample groundwater. And so I'd gone down through these narrow passageways, and I had an explosive meter with me to measure air quality. And I was dressed out. I have helmets on and lights. And I was squeezed through all these tight passages trying to get down to where there was flowing water so I could sample it. And I ended up getting into a dead-end cave that was an old alcohol production cave underground underneath those trees. So when I got into that room, all of a sudden my explosive meter went off like I'm in explosive gases. It had low oxygen and high explosive gases. And of course I'm panicked because there's no way to get out really fast. You have to basically crawl your way out through these tight passages. And I'm panicking because this meter will not shut off, and I'm thinking I'm going to die. I'm going to get I've been dying in this stupid cave trying to measure groundwater. And eventually I got out okay. Obviously I'm still here, and but I always remember the panic of being underground in a cave, very tight passageways, and explosive meter going off. And I just remember one more. So my friend Mark McKeever and I were over here sampling along a stream. Now I don't know exactly where the stream is. I can't remember, but there's a stream in here, and we were sampling the surface water. And I was down in the stream, and he was sitting above me, and there was a cow fence with an electrified wire on it. And so I'm taking the samples, and I'm reaching back to hand them to him. I put them in a vial, hand him to catalog. And as I turned to hand him this, I was sitting on the wet ground. In my ear, I don't know if you could see it or not, but I have a little indentation in my ear here where my ear hit the electrified fence. Now I was grounded because I was on the wet ground, and when this cow fence hit my ear, what it felt like was somebody hit me in the head with a baseball bat. My head exploded. It went boom, like this, and my whole body, of course, shook, and it put that little indentation in my ear. And my friend said, Mark said, what happened? I said, I don't know. I guess I arced off my ear onto this fence. And that gave me almost like a concussion. It was bad. So that was 4 episodes on this landfill, as well as torquing my leg over here, my itileal band. I had an itileal band injury for a couple of years of doing ground penetrating radar, walking up the side of the landfill over here. So this place was a nightmare for me. I enjoyed the work, but I got injured, and there's other stories too, which I probably won't go into, but that's the life of a field geologist. That's part 2. That's just from one site, and there's a lot more stories like this to come. Thanks for listening.